Earth is Our Witness. Today is yet another really interesting episode of Earth is Our Witness. As a reminder, this is a platform, invite-only platform, where we invite distinguished photographers from all around the world to share their images and stories with the purpose of inspiring creativity and compassion that really connects us all. I want to welcome you all the live audience for today's episode. Let's also start by welcoming my really good friend, longtime partner, Art Wolfe. Art, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. And you're right. It's a beautiful day in Seattle.
It always is. It never rains. It's always sunny. It's like the Mediterranean. It's the new California.
I agree.
Like I said, today is really special, as usual, because every time we try to bring someone interesting with a unique perspective, and today is no exception. Today, we're going to see some beautiful, breathtaking landscape work, but landscape in a very unusual sense, because today's photographer is literally a master at, I'm going to use the word detecting, like a detective, using arcs and lines and their interplay, their intersection, to produce stunningly simple, absolutely stunningly simple, yet the word I'm going to use is boomingly beautiful landscape images. And you'll see that as we go through some of these images and the creative process that the photographer uses. With that, please welcome really world-renowned landscape photographer, Charlie Waite from UK, from Europe. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Art and Parimal. That's extremely kind of you. I'm looking forward to this evening. In my case, this evening very much. It's dark outside. We don't have sunny weather like you have in Seattle. It's grey and drizzling, but that is not always the case. So, I'm very pleased to be joining you both.
All right.
Great.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Charlie. So with that, we would love to get started. Can't wait with images and stories and your creative process called Arc and Line. If you want to go ahead and share.
The very beginning of my photography began, interestingly enough, in the theatre, where I was photographing a lot of actors. And I found that I became extremely interested in lighting. And often the lighting director in a play, in a theatre, is what I call the unsung hero. They are very rarely acknowledged. The playwright is acknowledged, the actors are acknowledged, the wardrobe, the costume, the set designer, but the lighting director is very rarely acknowledged. And for 2 or 3 years, when I was in the theatre, probably for 10 years, I found lighting was incredibly important. So I applied it to, certainly I began to photograph a lot of actors, and then I applied lighting to my photography, and I became almost obsessed with it, really, the relationship of light and shade. And of course, your great Ansel Adams, and I won't be the only one who will have spoken of him, where it was said of his work that he was able to convert geographic reality to transcendent emotional experience. And that's one of the greatest lines. I just wished I had said it. So going to lighting, this is the sort of lighting that I enjoy. None of us like top light. I think most of us feel that that's like being in a doctor's or a dentist's waiting room, dental surgeon.
I hate that. I agree.
So side lighting, I think, adds, the one problem we seem to have with landscape photography, of course, is the two-dimensional nature of photography. And one always tries to introduce depth. And I hope I have here, I don't know what you think, but I like to think there's a feeling of the front and a back of the image.
Are you sharing, Charlie, something? Are you talking to an image? Or I don't see and if you're sharing, you might want to click the share screen.
Oh, I most certainly am sharing.
I thought you were just giving a background information.
No, I certainly am sharing. Hold on.
Glad I caught that.
Well, I was 1 second behind you.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was ahead of you. That's all that matters.
I hope you see this image.
We see your head.
My head.
And it's side lit.
Yeah. Well, I'm sharing screen. So let's just see if there's Yeah. I'm sharing screen, recording. Yeah. So
no, I don't see it.
I'm sorry, everybody, but we were good before. So share screen. There we are.
There you go. Okay. Now slideshow mode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Lovely. Okay,
So
now tell us.
everybody, I apologize. Put it down to the UK internet problems. We're third world here, as far as the internet is concerned. I have a dish on the veranda up on the top. So that was what you saw to begin with, and now this. So lighting, I think we're all, obviously as photographers, we're all seeing people. I have a little phrase called 360 degrees visually agile. And I think all of us who love photography, and I'm in the company of Art, so distinguished man you are, with an immense understanding of everything photographic. And I think all of us feel very passionate about light. So, and also layering. I care a lot about layering. So I was pleased that I could tuck these bales underneath this, this line of soil, and then a few little bales pointing up right at the back. And I don't really care to do much manipulation. I'm not very good at it, to be honest. I'm really not. When somebody said, do you do layers? I had to admit I didn't. So I think what you can do in the darkroom was legitimate. And I think Photoshop is wonderful, absolutely wonderful, but with restraint, if I may say. I don't know what you think, guys, and just don't cross.
Well, here's what I think. I think this is a beautiful image, and I love the rounded form, juxtaposed against these very lateral lines. And then it's just a beautiful study of textures throughout the entire image. It's just lovely.
Well, that's a great honor. Thank you very much. And it's interesting when you think of the criteria we all use to make that decision privately, because there's no one there next to you, is there, saying, yes, this is a masterpiece, go ahead, do it. You're all on your own, making these aesthetic decisions of balance, relationships, geometry, color, design, you name it. And it's quite a lonely business, but it's a hugely exciting one. And Art, you will know this probably better than any photographer alive, which is, that moment when you think, yes, it's there. I call it the final signal. I'm sure you do, where you just think, yep, this is the moment. And it's a beautiful moment.
Really well composed.
Beautiful moment. Well, we can move on to, I had a very strange commission to go to Libya some years ago. And I think it was 2011. And I was told that I couldn't learn who the publisher was or who commissioned me. It was just came through a sub-agent. And I said, won't you tell me who it was who asked me to go to Libya? And no, we can't, I'm afraid, they said. So anyway, I went for 5 weeks, and I covered all of Libya. I had 5 guides with me. They were all extremely friendly and lovely. And I'd never been to Libya before. I knew very little of the history, but I enjoyed it enormously. And my last guide, I said, what are you up to next? He said, I'm not leading anyone else. I'm not looking after any other visitors. I've got to be in Benghazi tomorrow. And I flew off that night. Well, the next day in Benghazi, it all went terribly wrong. So that's a little bit of history. Then the revolution took place. But I enjoy this image, and I would have liked a couple of things to have been different, which I'm quite happy to talk about. I'd have liked a little bit more modeling on the back sand dunes here. But what I did enjoy was the distribution of these funny little dwellings. And I cared a lot about the shadows here, which I hope you can see me with my little cursor. And this one very nearly bumped into that one. So I'm always trying to not have too much contradiction and trying to stop things like a vertical bisecting a horizontal. This, for example, I had a little ladder with me. I use a ladder a lot. And if the top of that little dwelling, let's just go back, had penetrated the sky here, I think I probably should be in treatment or in therapy for this little foible that I've got. I don't know, but I hope you like the image.
The first thing when I saw it, Charlie, was that it reminds me of Dr. Seuss, who was this illustrator, cartoonist for kids of my age. And just those opposing angles on those thatched roofs are so whimsical and light. It gives the entire image just this really happy, almost dancing-like feeling. And it's just juxtaposed against the sands of the Sahara. I mean, it's quite a interesting play right there. Beautiful image.
Oh, that's lovely. As you know, because many people will have commented on your marvelous images over the years, it's always rather lovely, isn't it, when somebody makes a comment about their emotional response to your work. It's hugely gratifying. We could talk for many hours about our photography, I'm sure. But luckily, Britain is beginning to realize that photography, is an art form. The US have certainly acknowledged that, but it's taken some time, landscapes to be a little more acknowledged. But I'll move on.
Yeah.
There are times when one makes a photograph that you a long time ago, and this was, to be quite honest, it wasn't really something that I was doing in the sort of full knowledge that I was making something that was going to be, balanced and quite entertaining and sort of almost comic, because it was probably one of the first within the first year of photographing. And I used a film that I'm sure many will know, and you definitely will, was Kodak recording film. It was phenomenally high speed. I think it was sort of 6,000 ASA. Anyway, there was a little breeze, and suddenly these deck chairs suddenly filled with the wind, and I was rather pleased. The Serpentine in London, in a London park.
Wow.
It makes it very playful. I got to say, suddenly the chairs that you're not used to seeing it this way suddenly come alive.
Well, and in fact, it implies sailboats on the water. I mean, it's got a real, again, like the previous image, there's a sense of play to the image. And all three of the images we've seen so far have a really strong architectural sense to them. So you are very exacting on how you compose the image. I can just see you walking left and right, forward and back until you just get it right.
Well, you're very perceptive, Art, and I'm sure the same could be said of you. It's very interesting that process of investigation. I think you said, Parimal, or maybe it was you, Art, the sort of detective, and
Yeah.
and you smell an image, don't you? You can sniff it out, and you think, I know it's here. I've just got to. Somebody told me it's a bit like trying to find a melody, and you're just waiting for a visitation to come from up high down to you, and you just need those notes. And also perhaps much the same with writing. What? I know what I want to say. Where's that sentence? It's so elusive. And then with photography, suddenly you're there, and it's a gift, and it's you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, it's funny you say gift, because I say to myself, and then when I'm teaching classes, when I go out, it's like, am I going to be present enough to accept the gift that will be presented to me? So that's very much in the mindset when I'm out there. There's images out there all the time, but whether I'm emotionally in tune with it at the moment I intercept the image is another question altogether. And I suspect I miss a lot of opportunities, but occasionally you do. You accept that gift and you seize the moment, and you've done it here.
Yes, well, that's very kind of you. Well, let's hope that we can continue in this vein. This is I had an exhibition in Tokyo some years ago, and I was rather nervous about it all, but anyway, I enjoyed it. And I saw, apparently, what is rather a rare sight. I saw that the crescent shape of the lovely dome of Mount Fuji, and people say you hardly ever see that. And in the old money, we always used to say foreground interest. I've got to find something to put down in the front. And amazingly, these three boats were there, and I didn't have to move them. And I was really pleased that the hulls, I often think the best bit of the boat actually is the hull. So when it's in the water, I often think you're rather deprived of the best bit. So when they're upturned like this, these little lines here, they seem to work the bow with the shape of Mount Fuji, and these, I think they're called fissures, aren't they? These things coming down here, they seem to work very well with the upturned boats. So I found it rather pleasing, rather like a still life in a way.
Absolutely.
It's the right term, still life. I remember that when I used to do painting in school, we had still life paintings, and literally this feels like a painting in that way.
Oh, you are kind. Well, there's the color now. We've done some black and white, because I was hugely influenced and still am from black and white photographers, and that I feel very, very strongly about color and black and white being on a par. Somebody said to me, a year or so ago, said black and white is more artistic. I do not speak to that person anymore. And I thought that was a most ludicrous assertion to make, absolutely ludicrous. They're both important art forms, and we all know that. But this structure appealed to me a lot. I think I'd probably been there half a dozen times. And I'm sorry to mention the great Ansel again, but recognition and pre-visualization blended together in a single moment of awareness, I remember reading once. And I must say that pre-visualization, and you and I we all know, you see it here, don't you? You see it in here. And then it's a question of producing an image that has parity with what you've seen in your mind. And I saw these segments, these geometric segments. And at last, there was a storm, and the storm passed. And after the storm came absolutely wonderful lighting that was ravishing, really.
That's wonderful.
I think just the subtle shades of yellow and ochres and greens are really what really, the form of the way it's laying out before you is strong and graphic, but with the color and the subtleties of those shades is what really brings the nuance to the image.
Oh, I'm so glad. I must say I enjoy it a lot. There was down here, there was, I think, once a little river, and you can just see where it's rather more green. So there's obviously quite a lot of moisture in there. Moving on. Yes, moving on. I've been fascinated by boats, but not the entire boat. I've always thought that the bow of the boat is very striking and powerful, and that's the bit that meets the water first as it forges its way through the oceans. And I've always liked blue and yellow together, cold and warm, you know, that kind of contrast of the two together. And then there was this empty space around here, of course, and I didn't really know quite what to do. And then I caught sight of a fleeting moment of a seagull, and I thought, oh, come back, you know, as one does. I want that cloud again, or I want that bit of lighting again. And we're hungry for the thing that's going to enliven our image. And luckily, two seagulls, after probably 20 minutes, half an hour, suddenly appeared, and in rather wonderful shapes. And so there they were. And I was there to receive the gift again, and it was lovely, the anticipation, and finally it all took place.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, I like it, in a little seaside town called Weymouth.
Go ahead.
I have a question, Charlie. I mean, you said about, you know, when you have almost the right composition here, and then you're waiting for something dynamic to come up, either a cloud or a bird. How long do you wait, you know, before you say, you know what, it's not going to happen, let's move on, take it for what it's worth and move on?
Well, Parimal, you've given me the cue. I'm aptly named Waite.
I love that.
I was waiting. Thank you for satisfying that in me. You know, there was a great need to say it. But
just for the audience, this was not scripted. This was not at all. It was, but I'm glad I asked the question.
It wasn't. But it would be very easy to say, oh, I waited ages, I waited days to produce this work. Art and I and all of us know that that's absolute nonsense. Sometimes you certainly do wait a long time, and what we don't like, in my view, and I think we're all the same, all of photographers, we don't want to compromise. We don't want a less than. We want to produce an image that, as I say, has parity with what we've seen in here. I don't think it's much different from somebody who's got the story for the novel, the composer for the music, somebody who wants to do a garden, beautiful garden. They pre-visualized it, and so anything less than is rather frustrating. So to answer your question, sometimes 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes it would be fair to say a couple of days. Once in the Somme area in northern France, I did wait a long time. And then, of course, I think I dropped off to sleep on one occasion. And I do wonder whether I actually missed a good moment, but I hope it came back. But yes, I wait a while. I often say that it's quite, when you see in a doorway which says no entry, no entry, you can't go here. I often think it's quite a good idea to be inquisitive, and I'm sure Art will agree the more photographers are more inquisitive. We want to discover and notice and seek out. This was a door that just said fire exit only, no entry. So in a rather naughty way, I pushed the door open and I found this. And I found it so graceful. And two triangles, both happened to be blue. And then I rather like the railings, and this rather voluptuous, for want of a better word, this lovely curve here appealed to me enormously. So it was a mixture of, I suppose when we call it arc and line, it was a mixture of quite severe verticals and horizontals, mixed with these rhythmical shapes.
It's like a musical note with bars.
Oh, why didn't I say that?
You don't get paid the big bucks like I do.
I love that. I'm going to borrow that, but I will credit you, Art.
Okay, good.
Musical note with bars. How lovely. There are times when I've departed from the pastoral scene, which I absolutely love, in the landscape, trees, mountains, valleys, rivers, and so on. And I think all of us sometimes find something that we find appealing. And this was quite a departure for me. It was near Gibraltar in southern Spain, in the Mediterranean. And I just saw these vertical layerings of white to a darker gray, and this diabolical yellow, and warm and cold always appealed. So I'm sure people have mixed feelings about it, but I rather enjoyed it, to be honest. And I did another image of a wall in Gibraltar, but that shrieking orange was quite appealing. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, they're complementary colors. Orange and blue are complementary colors. I think the band of water is what gives perspective. It's a completely abstract image, and then it's revealed with the texture on the water. And I think that's it's analogous to that image of the boat with the two gull reflections in the water. It's very abstract, it's very architectural, and then the birds give life to it, and the texture of the water give perspective to this image. So I love that play of cold abstraction with nature.
Well, that's very nicely put. I can't top that, Art. It's very nicely put. I did, at one point, I did think, well, perhaps we'll have the water using one of those neutral density stoppers, as they're called, but I'm not too keen on that. But they are very popular currently in the UK. People like smoothing the water, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Each to his own. We all are interpreting our landscape in very many different ways. But I'm glad I didn't do that, and thank you for that comment about the water. I must say it, and the little flicking waves worked quite well, I thought.
I had a question, actually, Charlie, if you go back, this is a very unusual image, if I could say so. And Art, I think you put it very eloquently, is the intersection of architecture and landscapes or nature. How did you visualize this when you approached this? Was it literally how you saw it, or you had to move left and right, back and forth to see, man, there's something really interesting here that makes it unusual? What was your process for composing this?
That's a very good question, Parimal. The thing that mattered to me was I wondered if there was sufficient content in the 3 vertical panels on the left. And I did wonder whether that was going to hold up, because they have no information in them. The only thing they've got is one becomes a bit brighter than the other. And I do quite like, severe triangles and rectangles and shapes interlocking with each other. And so I did move a little bit to the right and left, and I still sometimes wonder whether I could have had slightly less of the wall, but luckily I feel that the variation in tonal values in the left-hand side, I think it just about survives. But the yellow is absolutely fierce, isn't it? The yellowy orange color. This is an interesting place. Many people have been there before me, but I went, I think, in the mid-80s to Namibia. I went to a place called Coleman's Cop. Perhaps many people will know it. It was by the time I got there, deserted alluvial diamond mine. Apparently, you could just pick up diamonds off the surface of the ground. And then all of a sudden, there weren't any more, and they left. It was a small village. They had a cinema. They had a restaurant. They had about 30 or 40 houses, and they absolutely left in the early 50s. And now the sand has come in. And so it's very, photographers love going there, and I certainly wasn't the first. Many people have been there before me, but I did discover this little section, and I haven't seen anything like it, but there was a heavy sandstorm before. And again, to echo what Art said, the complementary colors of cold and warm seem to be quite effective here. I don't know what you think, but I'm pleased with it.
And you do love those triangles, don't you, Charlie?
Yes, perhaps I should have some therapy for them as well. I don't know what it is, but you know, some people say, "Oh, we have a signature," and I suppose that could be true. You know, certainly would the great photographers from your side of the world, of the pond, as they say, have signatures. Art, you definitely have one. Most people would recognize your work, and it's rather nice. I think perhaps people would recognize great painters and musicians and writers, of course. So I suppose we just find ourselves enjoying what we enjoy. This was certainly a bit of a departure for me. The mausoleum in Tripoli, it was a mist and it just came in off the sea and it was very vague. But I rather enjoy the interlocking of the shapes, I must say. It looks rather good as a big print. I rather enjoy making big prints, but I don't know what you think about this. It looks monochrome, but it's color.
Mm.
And so this is outside, and we've not been to Tripoli. I can speak for Parimal with certainty, but within a lot of most of the Muslim architecture, there's a floral design. You know, the interior of mosques are all abstract floral designs, and these obviously emulate lilies to me, but it may be just the arches and the structure, but it does have that feeling of organic shapes, does it not?
Well, I absolutely agree with you. The lily idea is very nice. I hadn't thought of that. But yes, I must say I would love to have met the person who designed it and just you know, knelt at the feet, because I just think it's an absolute masterpiece. So in a way, let's face it, I was to a degree recording something, hopefully as well as I could, that belonged to someone else in terms of the artistic expression and so on. And so it's very important to, I think, for us to be aware of that. I came across it and I produced an image that I hoped honored the workmanship that went behind it. I think oh yes, another rather peculiar departure for me, but it fitted with the arc and line idea theme. This was again in southern Spain, and interestingly enough, it was a visitor center to a Roman archaeological site. And I just thought this marvelous window, which had no glass in it, looked absolutely magnificent. And there was a little bit of blue just down here in the bottom, and the triangles worked terribly well. It could be seen as being rather sort of vacant and not much action, but I felt it was rather elegant in a way, and I felt it worked quite well. I don't know what you think. I spend a lot of time trying to make things leave in the corners.
Yeah, I don't see any triangles in this image.
Neither do I. Like
no.
Zero.
Yeah, there's no triangles here, so.
No, I see. For a moment, I thought, I love a bit of mockery. It's like,
we're not mocking. We're just having fun.
I love it. It's landed well. I'm a great one. You know, you only mock people amusingly and for people you are fond of, and I love that. So, thank you.
These are beautiful. We obviously, you know, Charlie talked about this collection a lot before we actually curated and invited you. Just absolutely beautiful compositions.
Oh, you're very kind. Well, we'll move on if we may.
I have a question. And I'm also looking at the phone to see if audience has any questions. Audience, if you have any questions, please ask, and I will take your questions as well towards the end. Just a quick comment, Charlie, from Nancy. I love the way your eyes see, and I see at least two triangles. So yes, Nancy is correcting Art and I that there are two triangles. Nancy, we were just joking, but yes, people love your images. My question is, were you thinking about having or not the clouds, you know, in the blue sky? Did you think about taking an image with the clouds and without the clouds to have the pure blue versus blue in the clouds? Were there any conflict in?
That's a very, very good question. I think it's fair to say that photographers, be they landscape photographers or reportage, are acutely aware of every single area on that canvas, from the very sides of the image to the center to the corners. I mean, I often say no painter would ever, disregard any part of the landscape. They wouldn't walk away thinking, oh my word, I've forgotten the sky. So yeah. That's a very good question. I remember, I can just fit it in, I hope. Somebody told me ages ago that it's rather like the advanced driving test in the UK, where the driving examiner puts their hand in the driving mirror and says, okay, to the person taking the test, what's the color of the car behind? How many people in it? Give me a couple of numbers on the registration plate. And is it a male or female driving? And are there any children in the car? And that's a really good way of describing the kind of intense sort of communion, for want of a better word, that one has with an image that you're going to make, especially one that's not sort of running away from you too quickly. So a very good question. Those clouds were needed to be there. I think and I think, to echo Art's very perceptive words, where he was mixing abstract with nature. Thank you for making that comment, Art. It was a lovely comment to make. Meant a lot to me, and perhaps you could say the same thing here, because that could have been just a blue panel if the clouds had not been there. So there were no clouds to begin with, and then they arrived, and I was very grateful. That was about 40 minutes waiting.
Great.
So, but there you are, funny little story. Same here, a place called Safi Gate in Morocco. Hanging around waiting for clouds. I think they work quite well. I rather like the yellow in the bottom. I like the theatrical element of it, where you feel drawn into entering through the arch, maybe. I don't know what you guys think, but it seemed to work quite well. No triangle.
Well, the distant wall, the farthest wall, the texture on the wall is replicated by the clouds beyond. And I love that play of textures and the layering that you seem to really be able to achieve throughout your work. There's a great sense of depth, and then layering and textures is just really quite nice.
Oh, what a lovely comment to make. Thank you.
The word that comes to mind when I look at this image and the images before is, I initially use the word detective, because you clearly are detecting things and pulling them out, and composing them. But the other word I would use is a sculptor. You're almost sculpting things out in 3D and creating a 2D photograph out of it.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well, maybe we could say that of that one, perhaps.
Oh.
But then, this serendipity does play a part, does it not? And we all know that. But if you're lying in wait, the shapes were right, but there was no sun, there was no light at all, it was dark. So I had a little look, I put the camera on the tripod, and then I went through this arch here, and then I looked up to the sky, and there was absolutely seemed to be no blue at all, and yet there was one little tiny disc of blue, and it seemed to be a little bit of blue that the sun would eventually be not obstructed through it, and it would light up. So I rushed back to the tripod, and all of a sudden this bit of pure theater suddenly arrived, and it was very, very enjoyable. And suddenly we got a pink, which I had no expectations of. I had no idea the shadows were going to appear here, because I had not seen it with sunlight. So the only word I could use was absolutely thrilling, because none of this had been seen before. I just saw a semicircular hemispherical shape here. I saw the gate, I saw the back wall, and suddenly, talk about something coming to life. It was really exciting moment, and the shadows and the pink, absolutely everything. Really enjoyed being there at that time.
And where was this, Charlie?
It was in Morocco, a place called Safi, a small town up near a castle, and it was lovely to be there. I really, really enjoyed it. So sometimes light is, well, we know that was I will continue to use that word, thrilling. It was the most wonderful, wonderful surprise.
Well, the top half of this image, without that metal gate, you would think it a pastel drawing. I mean, it's so soft and beautiful, but that the hard lines and the darkness of the gate is such a beautiful contrast to the rest of the images. And then you're right, you know, with the shadows and the arched shadow on the bottom, it kind of completes the image. You know, it could easily have fallen away, but that arched dark shadow contains your eye within that composition in a very elegant way.
Oh, what a lovely word to use, elegant. Well, thank you very much, Art. It's very kind of you to say.
A question for Art, you and Charlie, and would love your thoughts. And the question is triggered by, Charlie, your passion and the joy that I saw on your face when you talked about this image. I almost felt that you're reliving that moment again. Wasn't that true? You relive that moment. It's right in front of you.
Yeah.
And the question I have to both of you, perhaps starting with you, Art, is, isn't that true of photographers? Is sometimes you see moments that give you so much joy that you capture it, but every time you think about that moment, it feels like it's right in front of you, it's happening all over again.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely astute observation, Parimal. When I give talks, you know, occasionally people pay me for talks, but I probably would pay people just to be able to talk before them, simply because you're reliving great moments of your life, and it all comes back. And yeah, I can forget entire decades of my life, but when I see an image, I can remember everything around the image.
And knowing it'll never be repeated.
Yeah.
Well,
so no, it's, yeah, looking at your own work, it brings back memories. And yeah, go ahead with this one, Charlie.
Well, this is just aware of our clock. I think a lot of landscape photographers love what I call the lonely tree. And you can't really beat it, but it's quite interesting. I'm more than happy to admit, I'm not in any way precious, that there is actually a fault, and I'm not going to change it. I know I probably could, but I don't want to. Which is, I feel rather angry with the farmer for not quite laying the lavender in the way I would have liked, because I took a lot of time trying to get it right. But this groove here, this ditch between, as it were, between two lines of lavender, I wanted it to depart as it does successfully from the corner, but I couldn't get it to do the same there. Now, I'm sure many of you will say, well, Charlie, why didn't you just move to the right? But it was with my old Hasselblad camera, and I can tell you I tried very much. So, and I have a Photoshop friend who said, Charlie, I can fix that in 30 seconds. But I don't know, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't trouble me too much. And I quite like living with something that's, you know, not exactly right as I would have liked. But the lonely tree in the UK, well, everywhere, it gives a tree nobility and a sort of stateliness almost. And I don't know a landscape photographer who doesn't like the lonely tree. It was in Provence, in southern France.
Beautiful. Yeah. Did you go after the farmer and say, you idiot, when you planted this? Did you not think about this?
No, but what I did do was I asked the receptionist in the hotel if he would give me a call when the lavender was out, because it's a very capricious plant. You never quite know when it's going to do its thing. And very sweetly, he called, I think, on a Monday, and luckily I'd kept a couple of days, or 3 or 4 days, a week or so free, and within 24 hours I was there. Just flew to Marseille and wasn't far away. So wow. I was really grateful to him. This is a bit of a departure for me. It's a leaf in my garden. I think it's a rhubarb leaf. And I noticed that when it began to die, when the sun came on it and warmed it up, it curled up the outside of the leaf in such a beautiful way. And it was I guess it's fair to say the leaf was probably about maybe 20 to 30 inches across. No, 20 inches across. It was absolutely huge. And it just, this furling, I don't know what you think of it, but I rather like it, and the sort of green ribs going up in the middle. So I got some black velvet, put the velvet behind, and made a little still life of it. But I rather enjoy it. In other words, it was as beautiful in its slow departure from this world as it was when it was alive and well.
You know, Charlie, I think you've got a theme that you could start with: leaves, you know, the structure of the leaves, the textures of these, and shot in a very similar way. It wouldn't take long before you had a whole body of work. But there are those triangles too. And the entire leaf is a triangle. So it's very much in line with your previous work.
Yes. Well, that's very kind. Yes, it is. It is a triangle. I'll make that appointment.
I can see many triangles. Actually, go back to, I
Go
can
back.
see leaf triangle, the inner triangle, then the vein of the leaf. You know, there are 2 triangles on either side. There are 2, I see 6 easily. And then there are some more in the curls of the leaf. I'm sure.
There are, and here, of course, as you were saying.
Yes.
But
Beautiful.
I really did. I think one of the things in the UK, well, certainly, I think all over the world, is there's so much more one could say, and perhaps we'll have another chance at another time. But you know, I do think the camera is the most wonderful conduit to draw us closer to the natural world. And I sometimes think nature's running along one track and humanity's running along another, and we're so dislocated from it. We're so frighteningly disconnected. And I have a feeling that I'm sure you may or may not agree, but I have a feeling you both will, that we're perhaps going to respect our precious planet more than we have hitherto. And I certainly think photography, do you not think art helps us to bring that closer to us, to our hearts and our emotions?
Oh, absolutely, Charlie. I think that nature is making an assertion to humans that it is very much alive and there in the form of the fires and the storms that are sweeping in from the Gulf. If we're denying nature and the connection to human, it's in our face. So we very much need to wake up, and fellow photographers are going to play a vital role in recording what's happening out there, because the visual image is a very powerful medium. And in fact, I would say much more powerful than even the written word, because humans are visually inclined.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I often say that, you know, that the still image, it doesn't move. It has no dialogue. It's got no music to support it. And it works hard, but my golly, when it reaches you, it really does it not? And I couldn't agree more with every word you said, Art.
Thank you, Charlie.
It's beautiful. Charlie, thanks for sharing your beautiful images. Arc and Line, I do have a few questions for you, and perhaps for you, Art, as well. This has been magical. If you don't mind stopping the share, I can see you more.
Okay, stop share. There we
are.
I
guess, question for you, Charlie. You know, how do you see photography has changed, and what does it mean today, given, you know, social media is full of images, you know, flurry of images. How do you see photography has changed from your perspective?
Well, years ago, you know, people would say, well, you're bound to get something 36, you've got 36 goes, you know, something's bound to come out, trial and error. I don't think in the very early days in the US, probably, I think the US trailblazed photography. I do. I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you guys. And I think that digital has been a wonderful thing for people creatively. But when I heard that 350 million images a day are uploaded to Facebook and 85 million a day uploaded to Instagram, it was quite whether that's true, it was quite a shock. I think the photographer will always be, will always have the integrity, will have the determination to produce great work. I think all of us have a massive creative drive in us. And I think photography is perhaps more respected now than it ever was. I wish people would print more. Their sales of external hard drives are rocketing through the roof. I think a lot of people aren't editing. And when I'm sorry to mention the great Ansel Adams again, he said 12 a year and you're doing well. And I'd love to know what Art feels. I do not think we're all saying, I met somebody the other day saying, oh, this year I've done about 1,000 great images. And I thought, oh my word, that's unthinkable. What would you be able to say, Art, on a yearly basis, how many images that you are really deeply pleased with?
Well, you know, there's deeply pleased is much more pleasing to hear than I've created 1,000 great images.
Yes.
you know, people do self-congratulate a little more often than they probably should. I don't know. Everybody's taking pictures. You're right. And when I look at your work, there's a stateliness, a timelessness to it. It's well composed. It's beautifully, you know, light, form, moment all comes together in a timeless way. So I love seeing your work. I love seeing people of your same caliber's work, because you bring and you retain the importance of photography. I think the fact that everybody is taking photos and randomly shooting everything that they possibly can, including their fat heads in front of every, you know, important landscape, you know, it does, to me, diminish photography. But I think that the more we talk about it, the more we, and in this platform where we're bringing in great photographers and allowing them to have a voice in front of perhaps a new audience, I think it does elevate photography. So I'm really proud of that. In terms of me, God, I'm out all the day. You know, I'm going to be shooting within an hour of this conversation. I'll be out in the forest photographing because it feeds the soul. It keeps my spirits up. And during the time of COVID, the creation of art and things that bring happiness to me is irrefutable. And so I think, regardless of what the motivation is behind the photographer, if they're out shooting thousands of photos, you know, a year, and they're happy, that's the key. The happy is the main word here, because creativity does keep people on a much lighter and positive note. That was rambling, but from the heart.
Not at all. It was absolutely perfect. I couldn't agree more with you. Sorry, Parimal, you were saying.
Yeah, I have a question for both of you, starting perhaps with you, Art, this time. And it's a quote, I believe, Charlie, you said in one of your earlier Instagram videos. And it's, if I'm paraphrasing, if I remember, is that a print is a rightful inheritance of an image.
Yes,
so
that's exactly the word.
Yes, is something magical. So the question to both of you, starting with Art, is how important is printing your work and seeing it on a wall, you know, in terms of its fulfillment or its natural kind of conclusion of an image? How important is that? And how do you decide which image to print versus which image is, you know, beautiful but not print worthy, if you will?
Well, ultimately, I think that when you make a print from an image, if it's not the right choice, it's crowding out perhaps better choices down the road. So we make really critical decisions as to which images ultimately are made into a print. And you just have to be guided by your experience and knowledge and sense of design and all those things that make us who we are. I would make an analogy, though, that I love fine art books too. I love nothing more than to sit in my den and hold a book in my lap and turn the pages and really absorb the images. And when several years ago ebooks came online, people kept on saying, well, you should be really jumping on the ebook bandwagon. And yet I think the experience of looking at a book on a computer screen is so much different and less important than a fine art book. And then beyond the fine art books become the prints. And so the texture of the prints, the presentation of the print is all part and parcel of who we are and how we want our work to be seen. And it's no different than an actor or a writer or a musician wanting the stage or the platform from which they show and exhibit their talents. We all want to take care in that and preserving that. And so a fine art print would ultimately be the ultimate goal.
Well, you've expressed it wonderfully, Art. I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't. And when I said it was the photograph's rightful inheritance, I must say, when I do make a print, now that I've finally learned how to do it, I still make mistakes, a lot of mistakes. I have quite a big full rubbish bin, trash can, like we used to in the black and white darkroom days. But I hopefully get it right. A lot of people have helped me. have helped me with printing. And the process of making the image and making the print quite soon afterwards is really terrific. And I do think sometimes it helps me when I'm working, making a photograph. I do like to think, right, I've got a little thing here. I can just put it up. What am I going to put in this rectangle? And then I think, try and envisage it from whatever size it is you're looking at it through. Try and envisage it as a big print, and any errors are writ big, aren't they, when you make big print? And no, I always think no photographer should ever say, I didn't notice that. That's an awfully sort of humiliating thing to have to admit to. But I couldn't agree more with you, Art. It's a really important thing, the book and the print. But to imprison the image in an external hard drive or on the monitor for never to see the light of day, I think is really terrible. So, you know, exhibit, get the images off your monitor and onto a wall or into a book. Yes, I absolutely agree with you there.
That's well said, and especially about when you make a big print, all the flaws come out big as well. And you know, you see a lot of Instagram images that are taken with phones, and they look fine on a small phone, but then you see what they're really worth when you blow them up. You know, they don't really stand that scrutiny, if you will. And I think each and every one of your image, Charlie, is absolutely stunning today. Last question of the day, Charlie, for you, before we close it out, Art, with your closing remarks. Having seen what you have seen so far in your very illustrious career, what would you say, you know, the one thing you would want to say to fellow photographers about photography or even about life? What's the one thing or the one message you would have for all of us?
I think devotion, honoring, deep respect, having a communion, a deep communion. Don't be like a vulture and take. Make and give back and be thankful. And I think photography really can do that for us, and Art has alluded to that already. I think it's an incredibly wonderful medium, and it is contemplative and it is meditative. And I as you put it so briefly, what does Art get when he comes back from the forest? He's heady with and I think you'll agree, Art, that if you don't manage to secure an image, it doesn't really matter that much, because you've been communing and you've been trying, and it's a pursuit. And I would say that it truly does, as I think was Art's word, it feeds the soul. And just get out there and be in the natural world. And I know I've been showing quite a lot of man-made things, but that's a departure for me. And when we talked about arc and line, I thought arc and line was, you know, we both agreed that we would involve a bit of architecture, but just getting out into that natural world and communing with it and respecting it deeply and get closer to it. And the camera helps you get closer.
And I'll just add that I think when people take a class from me, I congratulate them, not because they're in my class, but because they're in a endeavor that's creative. And that, from what I've studied through art history, and I've had a lot of art history, artists tend to live longer lives. You know, they have longer lives than the general population. And I only attribute that to the process of creating and the enjoyment and the mental satisfaction that comes with that. So it's a very healthy endeavor, whether it's taking a picture or painting a painting or creating music or dance or whatever the discipline. That very act of creating is therapeutic and very good for your health.
I second everything you said, Art. From the beginning of this little
I think I'm in love with you, Charlie. I'll jump the pond. We'll just retire together in northern England and we'll be happy.
That's very kind of you. Sadly locked down currently in Yorkshire in northern England, but there we are. Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed being with you all, and it's really a lovely experience.
It was very good. Thank you. And Parimal, thank you for bringing us together. It was great.
Yeah, I second that. Thank you, Parimal.
Thank you, Charlie, for being here, and for Art. Just as a quick reminder, speaking of, celebrating art and creativity in our lives, Charlie has just a few more fine art, books of the book Arc and Line on his website, that he can send signed copies. It's all on his website if you want to go check it out. Is that charliewaite.com, Charlie?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's Charlie. And there's a new book called, it's kind of you to draw attention to it, called Behind the Photograph. All the business that takes place before you actually make that final moment of depressing the shutter.
Lovely, lovely. So you can see 2 books out there for you to all check out. And if you have seen Charlie talk, he not only is an amazing photographer, but also a very gifted speaker. You're very eloquent, Charlie, and I'm sure the book and the behind the photos, the captions are going to be equally poetic. I want to just again remind everyone to please do share this talk. It's a free talk to inspire all of us, with creativity and compassion. So please do share with your friends and family. It's live on Facebook and YouTube, and you can see Charlie's collections along with many other photographer collections curated on Instagram at Earth is a Witness. So with that, thanks everyone, and talk to you soon.
Wait,
Thank
one
you
moment.
both.
Okay.
One moment. If you want to see some of Parimal's work, tune in to Tequila Time with Art on Tuesday Pacific time at, 5:30. And I'm going to be critiquing some of Parimal's work. So tune in if you got the time.
Oh,
okay.
Certainly. I will.
Nowhere near Charlie, but I'll try. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you both for your hospitality.
All right.